Hopefully we are now live. This is our second, actually this is our third
time's the charm.
Third time the charm's wound up to get this live stream going. But thank you once again for checking in tonight for an Apokalupsis Historia live, as we're doing some classic Shakespeare authorship questioning, going back to one of the first cast of characters we talked about a lot at the beginning of the channel, which is going to be Thomas Dekker and the rest of the enigmatic Henslow crew. And before we begin, just wanted to say thank you to all of our Patreon, Areopagus Book Club members, and Substack supporters for continuing to fund our little endeavor here and get us back here on the scene. And like I said during one of these iterations, I'd forgotten on the second joke on these things, but I joked that I've got a special eye massage doctor for Chance and I. So
it wasn't worth repeating. It wasn't.
No, it was. Yeah. No, I tried. Anyway, so there's my comedic efforts there, but. Yeah, if you would like to continue checking out all of our little Patreon bonus content, we've got our book club recordings on there. If you want to see what that's like, we've got some excellent people in our club as we read all the Shakespeare stuff and great, deep analysis if you're into, Jungian analysis. And we're going into all sorts of stuff in the book club. I think it's really, really stimulating.
Yeah.
And we've got some other Shakespeare authorship questioners as well on there to sort of push back against our, crazy ideas sometimes, and to just, I think everyone's just got such a wealth of knowledge. And so if you're interested in any of this, and I don't know, I find that the more literature I read, I kind of find myself being able to cash in on all of this Shakespeare and Greek, sort of little research here, right? But thank you again to all of our supporters. All the links will be down below in the description. But without further ado, we're here to talk about Thomas Dekker and the rest of this, like I said, the strange Henslow scene.
And to be fair, I want to pull it back from Thomas Dekker for a second and maybe relate it back to the last video, because the last live stream we did was received rather contentiously, and understandably so. We're attacking maybe not key points of different authorial claims, but we were definitely showing that there's maybe flaws or issues with making certain claims. So, like, i.e., with John Florio, until something gets published, we don't have much evidence of him ever having gone to Italy. Like, when I say much evidence, all we have is internal evidence that he shows knowledge of places in Italy. But that's the same thing with Shakespeare. And so in order to make the argument that it has more documentary power than just assuming Shakespeare could pick it up, through secondhand knowledge, you need to actually show documentary external evidence that, Florio has gone to Italy. And Mariana says that she may have something, and it may be coming out soon. So we can definitely stay tuned for that. And... secondly, we also, we're showing that, look, Looney didn't solve it 100 years ago. I don't think many Oxfordians believe that, but there are a few out there, and we just wanted to maybe show the few that are out there that, hey, you can't really make that claim. There's other stuff that needs to be developed past Looney, because Looney himself kind of undercuts his own theory, and he undercuts it by saying The Tempest is not by Shakespeare, and that saying The Tempest is not by Shakespeare is inextricably bound with saying that Oxford is Shakespeare. And Looney himself says that. It's not our claim. I don't know if I believe that. I don't know if Brady believes that. But Looney himself says that. And so to take Looney's word that Oxford is Shakespeare, but then not take Looney's word that The Tempest is bound up with that, we have to explain that, and I don't hear that explained much. That was my only point. Not trying to debunk the whole Oxfordian case, not trying to debunk everything or anything that Looney's saying, just trying to say that citing Looney, you better know what's behind all of that. Okay.
Looks like people are coming in here. David was saying that he can now hear us loud and clear, but it looked like it was kind of glitchy when I was looking for making sure that the stream was going off.
Yeah.
So thanks for sticking around, everyone, and bearing with all the technical weirdness that was going on in the beginning here. But James was just going over the last live stream, just trying to, unstoke the flames.
Yeah. Let the air out, because there was, I think, a lot of tension about that, and once again, we're not trying to debunk entire claims. We're trying to show that these are the issues that we have to resolve or be aware of that the Orthodox will come back and attack us with. If we want to come at the Orthodox establishment and overturn their theories and, realign their establishment views to be, more open-minded about doubting Shakespeare or be, more into connecting a lot of these characters that we have in our, candidacies to Shakespeare. If we want to do that, then, yeah, we can't give them arguments that they can tear down in 2 seconds. Yeah, it's definitely pronounced Loney. Thanks, Philip. I don't know. I like the word loony. But yes, not because it makes him kooky, mostly because I'm a fan of Looney Tunes. But yes, Loney, James Thomas Loney. Okay, so let's talk for a second. Let's get down to brass tacks here. Brady and I have pitched a lot of Philip Sidney. You guys are probably aware of that at this point. We're excited about Philip Sidney. We think he could have an important role in this Shakespeare project, maybe even to the point of being one of the people that writes the plays or poetry, right? But I'm going to throw a wrench in our own theory here. I've always been a supporter of the idea that we can find the Earl of Oxford's biography in Shakespeare. I've always been a supporter that it's possible that he has a hand in the poetry and plays. I'm all on board with saying Florio can be a collaborator or, one of the main writers or, at the very least, an editor or reviser. I'm all for that, but, same with Mary Sidney, same with Francis Bacon. I have no issues with that, but tonight I'm going to throw a wrench in all these theories, and it's something that we all have to account for, and I don't know that I've ever seen anybody bring it up, and it's kind of just a simple thing, but the only way to account for it, if we want to keep doubting Shakespeare, is to look at Thomas Dekker. And it's one thing, it's real simple, and some of y'all might say this is stupid, but really want you to think about it, and think about it deeply, and ask yourself why this is happening, what does this mean, what can we take from it. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Actually, the Oxfordians seem to have come back to Looney. No disparagement. Because I think in a lot of cases now that Waugh is gone, and since a lot of this extra academic, when I say extra, I mean outside of academia, the methodologies that academia doesn't necessarily acknowledge or accept, that stuff's been pretty compelling to draw a lot of us in, but it hasn't done much to move the line in the sand with academia. It's done a great job at getting a lot of followers, get a lot of people interested, looking at different ways of this, but I don't think academia has really budged too much. Maybe some minor rogue voices here and there have been pulled in by some of that stuff, but yeah. Yeah, and so I think that's where this is moving, John. Excellent comment. It makes sense that such a big and popular brand might have gotten artists franchised or counterfeited. And I think that's maybe where this is sort of headed. I'm not going to pitch it too much because I don't want to give too much of a large framework. All right, what I want to talk about is, you can go ahead and pull up the Word document, Brady. So me and Michael Reed, a.k.a. Abzu, who you may have seen in some of the comment boards of some of our videos, which totally enjoy discussions with Michael, but he's a big Florio fan. He's a big fan of Mariana's channel over there at Resolute Florio, and rightly so. She's great. But over there, they love this idea that Florio has a lot of claim to Shakespeare because of rare words, specifically what are called hapax legomemnon, or in plural, legomena, which means it's only been used once by one author or one other author that matches it. It's so rare that it can be isolated down to one or two authors. And so she's gone through at least 5,000 words in Shakespeare and found that there's at least 150 to 200 hapax legomena shared by only Florio and Shakespeare. And Abzu's Michael Reed's been using that as a great argument for Florio as, at the very least, an editor or reviser. And while it is totally compelling and very suggestive, I've been arguing it's not conclusive without other tests, and we can go into that, but we're not going to. My point here is that regardless of those rare words, I want to know if Shakespeare uses a word 82 times and your guy doesn't use it, what does that mean? Can you ascribe everything in Shakespeare to your guy if Shakespeare uses a word 82 times over, a score or more of texts, and your guy never uses the word? Do you want to claim that your guy is the main guy or the only guy at that point? And that's an issue that I'm not just asking Michael Reed about Florio. I'm asking pretty much all of y'all about all of our candidates. The word is alack. Alack is sort of an interjection or interjectory phrase. It can mean darn. It can mean, oh crap. It can mean this sucks. It can, just like
versatile. And I do love that it's a very kind of very Shakespearean word.
Yeah, and it's very similar to right? Alas, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It has a very archaic feel to it.
It's a little more of a negative term than alas, but when a character sighs, when a character screams, it's a word that can be used. Shakespeare used it 82 times in 69 different speeches in 22 works. Most of those plays, but I think he uses it a few times in the sonnets, which I count as one work, even though it's in multiple sonnets. And then it's used in maybe one of the Passionate Pilgrim poems that's not usually assigned to Shakespeare. But for the most part, it's used in the plays. And here you go. I have them listed out here. We got Richard III, Love's Labour's Lost, Romeo and Juliet, Richard II. And I have it in chronological order given the orthodox mainstream chronology. Richard II, Midsummer Night's Dream, History of King John, Merchant of Venice, History of Henry IV, Part 2. Not Part 1, though. As You Like It, Passionate Pilgrim, Hamlet, Lear. It's used 11 times in Lear. That's one play. It's used 11 times. Tragedy of Macbeth. Timon of Athens, Coriolanus, Antony and Cleopatra, Pericles, Cymbeline, Sonnets, Winter's Tale, Tempest, Two Noble Kinsmen. It's pretty evenly throughout Shakespeare's career. Some plays it's used more, some plays it's used less. But you'll see there's a smattering of genres here. It's not limited to one specific kind of genre. We get history plays, we get tragedies. Some of these are ancient Roman plays, some of these are ancient Greek plays. Some of these are more contemporary type settings. Like I know Romeo and Juliet's supposed to be earlier, but for all intents and purposes, it plays closer to one of these contemporary tragicomedies or city comedies. Two Noble Kinsmen, yeah.
Is The Tempest supposed to be like a contemporary piece?
Ish. I want to say it's early 1500s, 1400s. Okay. Based on Italian stuff. So yeah, I don't really think that there's some way that we can delineate why we should see this word or why we shouldn't. It just seems like whoever's writing Shakespeare uses the word often and consistently. So let's ask who uses this word. If we don't think Shakespeare, who is writing alack? So scroll down, Brady. Authors who never use the word, at least in the documents that we found, that we have. We don't have everything that DeVere wrote, to be fair. But of the stuff that he wrote, never uses the word alack. Philip Sidney, same thing. We have more from him. Me and Brady are big Philip Sidney fans, so if he had the word alack, we'd be out here shouting it on the rooftops. I'll come back to that comment later, Vet. Let's see. Mary Sidney never uses the words. John Florio never uses the words. Francis Bacon, Fulk Greville, Edward Dyer, Walter Raleigh, William Stanley, Christopher Marlowe, Robert Greene, John Lilly, Michael Drayton, Samuel Daniel, Henry Constable, Robert Dayborn, Robert Burton, and I didn't even include these, but Thomas Goff. I had another 5 or 10 off the top of my head. Richard Barnesfield. They don't use it. Let's see. Who does use the word? This is interesting. So for you guys that are fans of Bob Prechter and his Oxford's voices, here's some of the voices that do say alack. Thomas Kidd says it one time. George Peele says it one time. Thomas Nash, who has several lengthy novels, uses it one time. Thomas Watson has several collections of poetry, even though we don't have any of his playwriting output. If he did have playwriting output, uses it one time. Chapman once, Harrington once, Henry Porter once, Churchyard once, and I know Bob Prechter has a lot of voices in there, and so maybe you can add these up, but 1 + 1 + 1, it's not amounting to 82. There's not enough. These guys use it so sparingly throughout their careers that it would be weird to say that your guy that's using it so sparingly with all these different works all of a sudden starts using it throughout his career pretty consistently. That's a weird thing to say. And in fact, you'll see that there's a timeline here. You're starting to see there's a line in the sand. All these guys are before 93. For the most part, not all of them. But all these ones that, not all of them, a lot of the ones that never use it, a lot of these that rarely use it, before 93. The ratio of usage to output, so we only have a few works from Thomas Kidd, but like one time in a few works is still not comparable to 82 times in 22 works out of Shakespeare's 40 given works. Shakespeare's still using it consistently in half his output. These guys aren't. Using Thomas Nash using it once. It's not close. Henry Porter we don't have that much from, so him using it once in a play, that's interesting. But it's still only once. So scroll down. I mean, Thomas Lodge has an immense output. He has dozens and dozens and dozens of works. He only used it twice, and it was in one work. Same with Spenser. Twice in one work. Gascon. Twice in two works. You'll see the numbers don't really get that much bigger. Beaumont, Breton, Harvey, Webster, Johnson, Ford, Munday, Fletcher, North, Chettle, Marston, Middleton, Rowley, Haywood. We get up into the double digits, and then, who do we hit? We hit Thomas Dekker, and the numbers skyrocket. They skyrocket to Shakespeare-like numbers. 55 times in 43 speeches within 22 works. Wouldn't you know it? None of these people get close to using it ever double-digit times in one work. Shakespeare and Dekker are the only two that do that. Some point, this is so unique and it stands out so much that I'm interested to see if there's a connection, if there is an association. Because at some point, if we want to pitch that our guy is Shakespeare, McDonald P. Jackson's going to shove the word alack down our throat. If you don't know who McDonald P. Jackson is, well, that's the first problem. Go do your homework. McDonald P. Jackson's one of the attribution guys for the establishment. He's going to shred us like the richest, most corporate lawyer would do to the poorest, saddest criminal that you could think of. That is what he will do to us if we are not ready. And so if you think I'm here to just tear down your theory, no, that's not what I'm doing. I'm trying to get us ready to actually do the work that needs to be done. And if we just hand wave off alack because it doesn't fit with our framework for our guy, yeah, good luck against McDonald. Good luck against, Brian Vickers or Gary Taylor or any of these guys. Jonathan Bate, for that matter. James Shapiro. Those guys aren't even that sharp of attribution guys, but they'll tear you to shreds if you don't have anything to account for this. And so if we want to doubt Shakespeare, the only way that we can account for this word is to insert Thomas Dekker. I don't know how else to say that. If you want to invoke your guy as part of a group, Dekker needs to be in your guy's group. If you want to claim your guy as writing Dekker, then you have some homework to do to show why he's using it so often under this voice and not the other voices. Establishment scholar equals gatekeeper. It's fine. We have to get into the gates. Are you not understanding this, vet? I don't understand. if you're just going to call them gatekeepers, you're just always going to be outside the city shouting. Do you just, if that's what you want, then just stay outside. That's fine. Keep doing what you're doing. The world will keep turning as it is. If you want it to be the self-fulfilling prophecy, go ahead. That's fine. We have to move past that and try and actually change things. If you don't think that changing things can be done, that's, it's fine. You're welcome to that. But I don't know, like Appomantus versus Timon, right? A Stratfordian will shred no one. Well, go try and argue against McDonald or Gary or any of those guys. I'd love to see it. You can film it, put it on tape, give me the transcript.
I'll moderate that debate.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so that said, let's look at Dekker's output and let's look at Shakespeare's output because I want to point something out. Any of you guys that are trying to say that Shakespeare's one person, you'll notice something about his use of the word alack. And if you scroll up, Brady, a little bit.
To the Shakespeare part?
Yeah.
All the way back up?
Yeah. You'll notice once you start using it, 1593 and, maybe possibly later because that play is not printed till 1597. That said, none of Shakespeare's early plays use the word. None of the University Wits era uses the word. There's a timeline here. It pops on the scene, and it's not like people didn't ever use the word alack. It was somewhat popular back in the day in the 70s. As we showed there, Thomas North used it 5 times in one work. He didn't use it in any of the other works, but he used it 5 times in that one work, which was a translation of text from India, actually, which is interesting. But that's all the way back in 1570. And then it doesn't really get used in the 80s. You don't see it in Lilly. You don't see it in Marlowe. You barely see it in Green or Peel. You barely see it in Kidd. And to be fair, we've lost a lot of text from the 80s, but for whatever reason, all these 90s guys, for the most part, are guaranteed to have a hit. Sans Drayton, but we don't really have much of Drayton's dramatic output. All these other guys that are Henslow guys, you start to see the word pop up. And lo and behold, pretty much all those Henslow guys, who do they work with? They work with Thomas Dekker, who does use the word super, super often. Yeah, I don't know. It's just pretty much that simple. Does that prove that Thomas Dekker's in it? No, that doesn't prove alone. It suggests that you need to start looking at Thomas Dekker. And sure enough,
maybe pair it up with some of the other earlier stuff that we've already pointed out in earlier videos. Hey, look, a bunch of Thomas Dekker plays happen to be the same name of Shakespeare plays. Can we compare them? Oh, no, we don't have those. You can't compare them. Okay, well, it just starts to stack up that, circumstantial evidence, or, if they want to call it that. But, it's, is this potentiality for smoke is what we're asking, right?
Right. So, yeah, you'll notice, like I said, 1593, and then it's used, not in every play, but it's used pretty consistently throughout Shakespeare's career from there on out. But like I said, not in those early plays. What does that mean? How do we feel about that? To me, it suggests that there was not a hand in that play or in the plays earlier on that does start to get in the plays later on. From these, 93 onward, it seems like Dekker has more influence and more presence in these plays from here on out. And it's interesting because, it's right before that when we get Shakespeare's collaborative plays like the Henry VI plays or Titus Andronicus or some of his early Lilly-like comedies. And then all of a sudden, after Richard III, that's Shakespeare proper. That's you're getting into peak era Shakespeare. I've always asked myself, what is the difference here? And lo and behold, we have a linguistic marker kind of showing us that there's a line in the sand here. And I just want to point out that that's right around the earliest point in time when we could or should see Dekker. We don't know exactly when he starts writing for the theater. We just know that he's already writing for the theater by 97, 98 when his name pops up in Henslow. But he's when his name pops up in Henslow, he's already Henslow's main writer, top paid writer. So it's incredibly hard to believe that some no-name guy that never went to college, that may be a Dutch immigrant or something, starts writing plays for the first time for the biggest theater company in London as their top, highest-paid writer. Like, that's crazy to me. He's got to have some other output that leads up to that shows he can do that. That might be our upstart crow, guys. Like, did you think about that? I don't know why I said it like that, but, did you? And so here's the thing. Brady and I maybe aren't original in this. There's people before that have pointed out there's connections to Dekker. Obviously, we've brought him up before. He's kind of the godfather of...
one of our Mount Rushmore Apokalupsis
Historia, Shakespeare doubters,
yeah.
That's John Stotzenberg. This is his 1904 impartial study of the Shakespeare title, where he is going through a lot of Shakespeare, and he's, the first part of the book, he's covering a lot of anti-Stratfordian ground. I don't know how some people feel about that, but he, just brings up, he's not so much one of these hateful doubters where it's like, your guy's totally a phony and F you. He's just saying there's reasons to have questions. There's some mystery that's still unsolved, and he's basically just an early Shakespeare revisionist. Like, he's just open to considering anything, and so as an open-minded person, he gets really interested in Bacon, and so he does the study to see how much Bacon is in there. And as he does his whole study, he ends up finding all sorts of stuff. He came up with Philip Sidney may have a major hand in the sonnets. He said that he does see traces of Bacon's hand maybe more as a reviser than a writer, but he says the main hands that he sees are all these Henslowe playwrights, specifically Dekker, Drayton, and then to a little lesser extent Chettle, and then to a little lesser extent Webster, and then a little lesser extent Middleton. But yeah, it's the Henslowe writers, guys. And then he says perhaps someone like Bacon or Ben Jonson, and he doesn't say Florio, but had he had Florio on his radar, I think he might have said the same thing, that those guys are more of editors and revisers and compilers than they are, immediate original compositors or composers or collaborators of the play. And so, that was 100 years ago. Not a lot of people got too connected with this. And then, not too long after this, you get Oxfordian theory booms, and, Darby had his little blip right around this time as well. It was very hot. And so this group theory was maybe overshadowed by some of that other stuff, because at this point in time, like, group theory was like a cuss word. People hated it. It was the fringest of all the stuff. Which, that said, there were some people that were loud group theorists, but what made people really hate is a lot of these groups were a lot of different people, and this guy's group may not be the same as this guy's group. And so those were always just weighed against each other, that y'all's theories are way too far apart. They're way too variable. Clearly, none of y'all have the right idea. And so, I don't know, for the longest time, group theory got thrown away. But ironically, is the French side was throwing away group theory. That's when the Stratfordians opened up to collaboration and disintegration. And, I'm kind of frustrated that they now get to hold that over us. That should have been us. We should have been the ones doing it first. Group theory was the original Shakespeare doubt. Like, that was Delia Bacon. It was a group. No way could it be by one hand. And I don't know, as far as like absolute or dogmatic claims go, that's maybe the only one I'll make, is that I just don't see how it can be by one hand. And I don't think enough people are reading enough other stuff to see the other hands that are popping up, and to see that all this stuff is super similar, and trying to understand the stylistic distinctions between them is tough, but you got to do it. At some point, there's other plays that aren't by Shakespeare that mainstream Orthodox scholars have to go and read, that are anonymous plays, and they have to try and figure out who wrote it. And a lot of times they don't have a lot of external evidence, So they try to do it through internal evidence alone. And sometimes that's rough. Sometimes it's, a little easier than others. But there's all sorts of methodologies to do that. And I don't understand why not just us, but the mainstream scholars too, won't apply that in full or won't apply that earnestly to Shakespeare. And so that's been my approach for a while here now, that I think we need to do a heavy-duty stylistic deconstruction of Shakespeare to fully disintegrate Shakespeare beyond just saying, oh no, just Titus and just Two Noble Kinsmen and Henry VIII and the crappy plays, the early and late plays, like
those parts that stick out, like that witch scene and Middleton.
Yeah,
that doesn't make sense to us. So that must just like they don't even have quite a handle on like what that collaboration really even means, right?
So yeah, and just in case you're worried, like, okay, that's some 100-year-old theory. Are you digging it up like a zombie? Well, there's this other guy that's around now, and he's actually getting responses from mainstream Orthodox scholars, albeit they don't necessarily love him. Next one. Yeah. Albeit they don't necessarily, love what he's saying. He's at least getting responses because they're like, okay, this isn't perfect, but we see what you're at least saying. We'll acknowledge it. And so there's a guy named Barry Clark out there, and he wrote a book called Francis Bacon's Contribution to Shakespeare, A New Attribution Method. And it's weird. I don't even know if he's aware of John Stotzenberg or not. I haven't gotten a copy of the full book, but I have read the first introduction chapter, which spells out the book, and I read Jackson's review on it, which, yeah, he's not kind to Clark. But Clark almost mirrors Stotzenberg exactly, that Clark came into this whole thing as a Baconian and wanted to do the nitty-gritty, dirty work to, find and prove that it's Bacon. And as he was doing it, he realized on a stylistic, stylometric, whatever level you want to say that's going into, the actual internal evidence, he's like, a lot of it's not Bacon. A lot of it seems to be, a bunch of various hands. And one of the hands that he says is Dekker, albeit he does not give Dekker as near as a main role as others. And Barry Clark also kind of straddles the fence a little bit, as far as I can tell, with saying whether or not Stratford is or is not somebody to consider. And I can maybe empathize with that, like, is there a reason to say that there could be an actor-writer that could still be part of this, and that's why his name gets applied to it, and he's still the most marketable, and he's a shareholder, so all that makes sense, but all this other genius must come from these other hands, or something like that. But then sometimes I think he just outrightly says no, there is no Stratford. And anybody out there that's read this fully, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because like I said, I've only read the intro chapter. Trying to find a free copy of it. I need to maybe give Barry a shout. Let's see. So yeah, and this is from 2019. This is super new. In the SAC world, that's very new. And I'm glad that he found it, and it seems that he found it pretty much independently of Stotzenberg. And so, at the very least, he's seen what we're seeing, what Stotzenberg is seeing, and in various different combinations. And it's enough to be suggestive. It still needs to be worked out. I don't have quite all the stuff that I wanted to drop on you guys. Guys, look, it's for sure Dekker. It's for sure Dekker. But I'll just say, we were doing Merchant of Venice recently in book club, and I was absolutely struck by how different Act 2 reads from kind of the rest of the play, especially the Gobo scenes, Lancelot and his dad. It just seems like a whole giant stylistic shift. And yeah, I get it. Those are the comedic scenes. There should be a little bit of a shift, but I mean, like on a syntactical level, on a, diction level, on a thematic level, even, it seems in contrast to the rest of the play. And sure enough, the word alack, when it pops up in Merchant of Venice, it's popping up in Act 2. And it pops up several times in Merchant of Venice, all of them in Act 2. And that's the act that, without even the word alack, and it's not even what drew me to the word alack, honestly. When I was reading through that, I was like, God bless, this reads just like Thomas Dekker. This reads just like Thomas Dekker. And so it's not to say that Dekker's writing the whole play of Merchant of Venice. In fact, I think there's a good reason to think most of the play is not really by Dekker. That it would be some collaborating writer with Dekker, probably one of these Henslow guys. And it's not to say that these aren't getting worked over by other people, and it's not to say that stylistic and internal analysis is perfect or easy, and there's a ton of noise, and it's going to be difficult, and you have to deal with all sorts of bibliographical processes, like, are you working with manuscripts? Are you working with foul papers? Are you working with fair copy? Are you working with, later prints? Are you working with, suspect prints? Or are you working with bootleg prints? Are you working with stuff that wasn't found till much later? Are you working with something that's been through many prints or has many various editions? Like, all that has to be worked out. But at the very least, all this evidence on alack still kind of holds. There may be some other document out there that's been lost to time where Edward de Vere used the word alack 100 times, but we don't have it. If we want to make this sort of Praetorian argument about having various voices, well, we got to kind of maybe stylistically make that argument, especially if you're arguing that the voices are different stylistically for a reason. Like, well, define those voices. Start there. And so, just maybe trying to pitch, look at this internal evidence, think deeply about your framework and what you want to say about this word alack. Because it's kind of bizarre to me that Shakespeare and Dekker use it, in magnitudes more than everybody else of the period. Whether dramatist, poet, pamphlet, magnitudes. Let's keep that in mind. Consider that. Maybe I'll let Brady go for a second. Up there goes our camera. I've been yakking too long, but Brady, you got any thoughts on this?
As far as I like how it's just a very Shakespeare word, to associate with, and lo and behold, the reason why I would even get to say that is because it does appear in his work so much, and it was interesting, when you started to show me the numbers that, it's not so much that other people don't use it, it's just like, what's the chances that someone uses like it to the heightened extremes, or the same volume as this, the Shakespeare writer does, right? And I don't know if you even went over the rest of his plays yet or anything like that. About any of this stuff.
It's interesting that Dekker's supposed to live a lot longer than Shakespeare because he's 8 years younger than him supposedly, which we don't know exactly. But if you look, it's like, pretty much overlaps with Shakespeare's peak era, and sans 2 or 3 of those, that's all within Shakespeare's timeline. And I've also wondered about those, Cold Year, Calamity, or Dekker's His Dream, or other texts, because those are all supposed to be when he's in prison. And, not exactly sure how that process works, that this guy who's, in debtor's prison is pumping out pamphlets to make money, but can't seem to pay his way out of debtor's prison. So the whole thing's a little...
Is he not worth more on, writing plays?
Yeah, well, and it's like, I don't know, maybe this is a good workflow for him. I don't know. Genuinely, it makes no sense to me. But they say that he continues to write plays after he's out of prison, but you'll notice, that word alack never pops up again, even though he's supposed to keep writing for the next 5-10 years after he gets out of prison in 1620. So it's just interesting to me that it, pretty well clusters with Shakespeare. And one could argue, it doesn't start till 99. Well, that's because we don't have any of Dekker's plays before 99. All his plays from 97, 98 are lost, all those Henslow plays. We don't know if he wrote plays earlier than that. We have another essay here that's going over the influence of Greek in plays by Shakespeare and Dekker, and it's kind of talking about how we don't fully understand the era, which rightly so. It's definitely a Shakespeare revisionist paper, but in that one, it itself is bringing up the argument that, well, you start seeing a lot of Greek philosophy, specifically Pythagorean philosophy, in Shakespeare from The Merchant of Venice onwards. And so Todd Borlaug here's, or Todd Borlick, sorry, is going to argue that you don't see it on the stage until you see it in Pythagoras, which is itself lost. We don't know if that's the case or not, but it is a play from 96 by Henslow, and that, in Shakespeare's output and other people's output, we don't see that much Pythagorean-type theory. And then all of a sudden, you see it in Merchant of Venice and onwards after, and he's wondering if that's coming off the back of some different admiralsmen plays, specifically Pythagoras, and who might have written that, since it's in 96, and we don't know who exactly is writing for Henslow in 96, since Dekker and Drayton, Chettle, and all those guys aren't yet being listed, because authors aren't yet listed till 97, and that any authors that were writing in the earlier period that we maybe think we know were writing for Henslow, like Green or Kidd or Marlowe or Peele, all those guys are dead by 96. 100% of them are dead. Thomas Nash is not dead, so maybe Thomas Nash, maybe Ben Jonson. It's right around when Nash should be doing like Linton stuff, and right before he'd be doing like Isle of the Dogs. But other than that, like I don't think Ben Jonson and Thomas Nash are the two of them just pumping out all the works of Henslow. So it would be fair to guess that Dekker's already able to be working for Henslow, and probably other guys like Drayton and Chettle as well. Probably not guys like Middleton or Webster. They might be a little too young by 96 or at 96. But Dekker, that makes a ton of sense. And so, yeah, it may be this admiralsmen play that maybe, and I know it's a lot of maybes, maybe written by Thomas Dekker, that starts bringing in this Pythagorean theory to, this Elizabethan theater in the first place. And this Pythagorean theory specifically is this idea that all the world's a stage. That is rooted in Pythagorean theory, apparently, according to Todd Borlaug, where Pythagoras says all the world's a game, and, the men and women merely players. So it's just adapted to the stage, which is itself kind of like this, passive game, right?
There's a self-Deckerian line about, he describes himself, right, where he says that he apparently touts that he's pulling from non-English sources. I think that he is able to get it from Greek or Latin, or that that's what he's reading from, because I think he straight up names like Euripides and maybe something else too.
Interesting.
If you go look at some of those Henslow diary names, like we've lost his. Well, one, we do know that there is a Dekker play that is Troilus and Cressida, right? That's the one we sort of speculated, like, hey, is any of this maybe reused or repurposed in the Shakespeare version? We don't know. We don't have it.
Right.
But there are entries for a play called Agamemnon, and there is an entry for a play called Orestes Furies, and I'll make another video, I think, about this later. But the point is that those would be the natural continuation of the Trojan War, but yeah, it's just... when we looked at some of those like other Shakespeare plays, it's a lot of historical sort of Roman Latin plays, right? And yeah, here's Dekker like literally working in that same vein, and he's sort of once again like showcasing like, oh, I'm like reading all that Greek stuff, and
right.
I've read essays where people are like, we don't really know how he's reading that because we don't really know who Thomas Dekker is, and so maybe he's friends with Ben Jonson. That was
the answer, and it's like. Wait, one of the few things that we think we know about Thomas Dekker is that him and Ben Jonson hated each other.
Yeah, right. Or maybe it was supposed to say Shakespeare must have gotten it from Ben Jonson, because Jonson accuses Dekker of doing nothing but dressing up old plays or something like that, right? So there's nothing original in him, I guess.
Right.
And once again, it's Ben Jonson just being tongue-in-cheek here, and
but
it's just like
isn't
some
that
other weird layer to that comment, right?
Right, but isn't that like basically the Upstart Crow complaint? Like, oh, he's taking our old plays and trying to dress him up for himself. Like, and then Ben Johnson's like, I don't know. It's like, it seems like there's an MO here between people that use alack and people that, like, it's funny. I can isolate that, right? I can do that. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to belabor this point too long, but I want you to think about that while you're reading. I want you to try and start thinking about the words on a word level. Maybe not too hard. Don't lose the forest for the trees or vice versa. But yeah, it's funny how these little linguistic markers like interjections, contractions, function words, like functional verbs like do and has, or doth and hath, pronouns, all these things can be idiosyncratic markers that aren't conscious decisions. It's not really part of the artist's conscious, deliberate style. It's part of their unconscious, subconscious style that that's how they function. That's how the world sounds and looks and feels to them. Maybe not always, but to certain kinds of characters that are prominent in their works. So you see these words pop up in these plays. You see these words pop up in these plays. And lo and behold, yeah, these plays are by this author. These plays are by this author. I know that sounds like an over-reduction of the whole method, and it is. But that's basically how it works. And it does work. It's an accepted methodology. And, Cyrus Hoy back in 1959, I think, he disintegrated Fletcher and Beaumont's canon. He showed that, guys, it's not just these two. Clearly, yeah, there's a bunch of Massinger like we thought in there, but it's not just him either. There's a whole bunch of guys in there. You can find Webster. You can find Ford. You can find Benjamin Johnson. You can find Chapman. You can find Middleton. You can find Raleigh. William Raleigh, of course. You may even find some Nathan Field in there. That's a bunch of guys. But for hundreds of years, we just put Fletcher and Beaumont on the canon. So it's like, guys, why don't we use those same tests earnestly on the entire Shakespeare canon? No, I don't think anybody's quite willing to do that. But Cyrus Hoy himself said that, look, it's going to be difficult with Shakespeare because Shakespeare seems to defy linguistic tests altogether. But it's like, well, then, are you sure you want to write this whole thing with this linguistic test proving that for Fletcher and Beaumont? Like, why is it that it works on every other author but Shakespeare? That seems crazy to me. That seems like a bizarre claim. So, yeah, I don't know. At some point, I think that it just means that it's difficult because you're going to have to go and pick which quarto text are you taking, which folio text are you taking. We have a lot of multiple texts of Shakespeare that aren't all the same. Fun fact, guys, if you didn't know this, go read the quarto version of a play that comes out in like the 1590s. Go read the folio version from 1623. Won't be the same words. Whether you think Shakespeare's Shakespeare, you think Shakespeare's Edward de Vere, they're probably not alive in 1623. Who is making those word changes? Is it authorial or not? I mean, all these are difficult questions. At some point, internal analysis is what you have to go to try and answer this. That's all you get. It's the bottom line. And we're here. And so, I won't ramble on too much farther, but we'll close it off here.
Yeah. So, send off in the comments if there's any words that maybe you've spotted that maybe are another good rabbit hole to follow along. Or there was another test. I can't remember what the word was, but we had... I don't know what we were reading. We were reading something else, I thought, in the same era. But there were some words you were finding that other people would use that Shakespeare would never, ever use, too. Yeah, so it's, just to make sure that this is not just, haphazard, right? That hey, look, there's a bunch of authors using stuff that Shakespeare never uses. Like, what does that mean? How can does that add, help us solve this Sudoku mess, essentially is how I like to describe it. But, it's, I wish I could remember what word it was. But I remember thinking that was, interesting. It's like, oh, wow,
it was when I was doing my Ironside rare word searches, and it was a word from Edmund Ironside.
That sounds right. Yeah.
There's a bunch of words in Edmund Ironside, guys, that Shakespeare never uses.
Which is a badass title play, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, here it is. I got my hard copy, guys. I got my hard copy.
Philip, if you're still here, you hear this? Here's another book.
Yeah, here's my Edmund Ironside.
Oh, thank you, David. Win as.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Win as. Yeah. Well, Shakespeare does use win as, just not often. Shakespeare uses it 11 times throughout his canon, whereas it's used 11 times in one play in Edmund Ironside. And Edmund Ironside's not a full play. It's 5,000 words. It's like a sixth of Hamlet. So it's like having the word win as in less than the first act of Hamlet, 11 times. And if it was used that often throughout Hamlet, it would be in Hamlet 60-something times. That's how often it is used in Edmund Ironside. So to suggest a guy that uses it once every 90,000 words or so is the guy that is using it, once every 500 words or so, like it's not the same guy, right?
Does that mean more or less that whatever part of Edmund Ironside we do have is more consistent of being like one singular hand or something, or fewer hands?
Maybe fewer. I don't.
Depending if it's like unless they're all clustered in one particular section or something, right? But if it's pretty,
they're evenly spread throughout the play for the most part, but it is not used in Act 5, and Act 5 does seem to be kind of a different set of words. That said, it doesn't feel like it's so obvious that this is Act 5 feels like a totally different thing. Like at some point, I think all of us, including myself, are underestimating what they're capable of with collaboration. That they can work over each other's ideas. When one guy scribally rewrites somebody else's stuff, they're working their own stuff in. They're paraphrasing constantly. They're reworking constantly. Maybe that's an unscientific, hypothesis, but at this point, I'm pretty convinced of that. And it's not because of Shakespeare doubt stuff. It's because of me wondering how the heck Hand S and Sir Thomas More works. Because Hand S seems it on one token, it seems pretty consistent, but it's consistently inconsistent, where there's little pockets of whoa, this sounds different. And I would argue that happens a lot in Shakespeare. I would argue that happens pretty heavily in Troilus and Cressida, where one part feels like one style, and then very quickly you're in a different style. But then somehow you've, wandered your way back to that first style again. Any other last final thoughts, Brady? Just maybe end this off with a period, not an exclamation mark. Guys.
The Thomas Dekker rabbit hole, I think, is weird because we've already gone through his biography before. We've already mentioned his obtuse background, very shadowy background, and the bizarre situation of him going to jail at the behest, not the behest, but at the to the debt owed to John Webster, which the biographies are just super strange, and then trying to parse out their output with all that stuff.
My bad. Scroll down on my Word doc over there. I forgot to mention. I forgot to mention over here. I went and looked through other plays that are anonymous just to see, are there other plays that we could maybe attribute to, a Shakespeare or a Dekker just based on heavy use of alack alone, or not conclude, but suggest that we should go look at them. And 2 times and 2 speeches for each of them. So. Who knows?
And that was my first question, too, because Chan said, King Lear used it, a bunch of times. And then I was like, oh, do they use it the original one? And
so they use it twice, but it's not 11 times like it is in the Shakespeare remake. And so, those were the only significant anonymous plays that...
do we have a copy of The Valiant Welshman?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, obviously somebody's got a copy somewhere since they can count the word alack.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. But if there's some actual available copy that's gonna be printed or not, I don't think so. Which, let me see. I don't think it's to be confused with. Dekker has a play called The Welsh Ambassador, or Ambassador. There may be something there, but I don't.
Every Woman in Her Humor, is that another one that you speculated could be something else too?
So I mean, it's clearly a spinoff to Johnson. Johnson has Every Man in His Humor, Every Man Out of His Humor.
Okay.
So now they got Every Woman in Her Humor, which we know Fletcher did his own spinoff sequel of Taming with The Tamer Tamed. And so perhaps something like that's happening here with whoever's writing Every Woman in Her Humor. I forget what years those were all printed. King Lear's supposed to be early 90s. Every Woman in Her Humor, I think, is late 1600s. So 1606, 7, something like that. Maybe wrong. Welshman seems around then, if not the 16 teens. But Could be wrong on that as well. I should have written that down. But yeah, it's not like there was a bunch of anonymous plays that used the word that popped up. So of the ones in the EEBO and on the UMich website, the early English books online on the University of Michigan website, this is what popped up, guys. Can't really sugarcoat it. Can't really put it another way. Dekker and Shakespeare kind of stand out, and we should maybe try to explain that. Okay, that's it. You can sign us off, Brady. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope that was interesting. Hope you dug it. Hope it makes your thoughts turn and churn and burn. And yeah, hope to be back with some more stuff later and give you some more of the edited content and keep coming back with the live streams for the interaction. Thank you guys for watching this live. Thanks, Vet Stadium, for playing devil's advocate. Thank you, David, for coming in, keeping us sharp as always. Philip, love seeing you, dude. Check out any of these Dekker plays if you can, man. I think you read Shoemaker's Holiday back when, I believe. I think you and I discussed that. I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's right.
But yeah, if you can't get your hand on all these, definitely check out, I don't know, The Honest Whore, Witch of Edmonton, Noble Spanish Soldier. I think those are maybe some of the better, heavier hitting Dekker plays that, give a sensibility of Shakespeare, if not perfect, clones of Shakespeare. Obviously, Satyromastics and Patient Gristle as well. Maybe not obviously, but those two as well. Those tend towards the more Shakespeare-y, purpley type stuff. But yeah, Dekker can get really silly and comical like Shakespeare, but he can get pretty darn poetic too. So he has range, and we should not underestimate that range. But we should also consider that maybe that is Shakespeare's greatness, is that it is able to put a lot of really talented people together and make the sum more than the parts, I'd like to, keep pitching that.
Thank you, Charles. And David says, look at Patient Gristle for Winter's Tale.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I guess definitely before we get around to Winter's Tale and Book Club, which I don't know if that's coming up super soon, but it'll be on the radar at some point.
I always like pointing out that in the anonymous Edward de Vere movie that Thomas Dekker is one of the characters, and he's like this laughing, giddy, sort of young goofball person.
Yeah, nerd.
Very hysterical and just interesting, weird portrayal. Just sort of bizarre. Well, we won't go into anonymous.
Don't make me go into that movie, man. Won't do it. If anybody wonders why I don't like that movie, mostly I struggle with the timelines. It's so just goofy with the timelines today. I can't handle it. Okay.
Otherwise, check all the links down below in the description if you want to come hang out with us on Discord or Book Club or otherwise.
Yep.
We'd love the support. Otherwise, we will be back here going through these grueling essays for the folk. And we hope to see you on the next stream. Hopefully we'll be back here next week. Keep an eye out. Otherwise, for our edited content coming out soon. Check out our Substacks for my upcoming essays that are sneak peeks of the videos or some of Chance's musings on this stuff. But otherwise, I think we'll sign off here for the night. Unless Chance has something else.
Nope. I was checking my notes, and I can't read my handwriting. Look at this chicken scratch. Nobody can read that.
We got a real handy situation over here, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
All right. Otherwise, y'all take care. Good to have y'all here in the chat. Adios, everyone. And as always, nullius in verba.